Yes, we used to think that technology might rescue us from our problems. But as time went on, we found that technology increasingly has become our problem. And not in the obvious way, in that it raises difficulties in itself, but rather in what it excludes. In other words, a preoccupation with technology, measured in its achievement by, in some sense, productivity, output, growth in national income, if you like, detracts and seems to exclude a true priority, which is how to live together in harmony. Whether it's on a micro level of how do I talk to people properly and relate more than civilly, but successfully in terms of relationship. Or whether it's on a macro level of nations not warring together, but cooperating in the welfare of its peoples. In terms of the old religions, we would say we need to be spiritual, not material. In terms of our social science, we would say, how do we overcome conflict and achieve harmonious relationships? We've spent very little resources in these micro and macro fields, and an enormous amount of attention upon our material, technological progress that seems to have exasperated any hopes of resolution to the problem that's really our priority, namely how to live in harmony with each other, with nature, our environment, with our true best interest, the which we spent so little time evaluating and considering that we've very little idea of what it would be. Other than it's not the way religions seem to have thought in the past. And that it's a way that's not understood in the present. You see, it's not a lack of understanding that is our problem. We understand a great deal about things that can be understood. The physical world. Our problem is our lack of correct faith and trust. That is the foundation, the necessity of any action being made. So when you decide on some technological project, a dam or a new system of defense or something like that, you have to have an expectation of feasibility of doing it, of making whatever it is you have in mind. Without that hope, that reasonable shot in the dark, you're deciding to build a bridge. Well, how big a saving will it be? To who? In what circumstances? Everything's unknown. Well, the city's been growing at this rate, so it might continue to. We're probably going to need cars in the future, but we might not. We might not even need roads. We may be flying. We may not be moving at all, but doing everything on Zoom, video. But you say, oh, well, yes, I don't know, and I can't say how safe it is. I just think it would be a good idea. Now, that's the reality. I, as an economist, could perform for you some wonderful cost-benefit analysis and charge you a great deal of money for it. It'd be no more reliable than the man in the street. It will be technical, and it will meet the requirements of a feasibility report and so on. It may justify you doing something. It may even persuade against a certain opposition to the project. It may be very useful in that sense. But what makes the project actually come into being is someone chooses to trust that it will work. In other words, in simple everyday language, if we talk about the individual, I won't even lift my arm if I don't think I have some expectation of being able to do it. If I've not been able to move my arm for the last few months or years, I don't wake up with the expectation of moving my arm. You say, well, I'm not able to do it. Well, try. I could try. It doesn't move. We don't live by understanding. We live by hope. Hope born of experience, yes. Hope born of successful experience, things that were good. This pattern worked in the past, might work in this, in some regards, unique situation of the present. I think it will. And I'm willing to trust resources and effort to see if it does. Do you see? Living is not dependent on understanding, but on expectation. And expectation in circumstances of uncertainty is very unreliable. And unless you hope to be right, you won't encourage and follow through on attempting to do anything. As my mum would say, we live in hope and die in despair. As she wasn't too optimistic about life. She was rather a realist, you could say. But we don't want realists. We want people that bring life and vitality, which means hope. If there's no hope in this project, we're not going to attempt it. That's the end of the matter. Life is a question of trust and faith. Trust in other people, the partner you marry, the projects you do, the relationships you have, and of hope, born of experience, yes. Of what we might say the successful experiences that encourage us to anticipate that this attempt into the unknown, to some extent, always the uncertainty of life, may be the best way to go. This used to be the providence of religion. Province, not providence. It used to be what religion was about. Or at least it used to be what the philosophy of the founders of such religions was about. But of course, in organisation and worldly terms, religions became extremely structured and became more a question of understanding than faith and trust. How do you increase faith, hope and trust? Well, it's very simple. You look at everything in the past that's worked. Get a feeling for what's likely to work. It's like the person who's looking for counterfeit notes. Well, he should study. Be incredibly familiar with what a genuine note looks like. One that's not counterfeit. And then he'll be so clear on what has worked in the past, what is the genuine. He will notice when he's confronted with something that isn't. Instantly, you think, oh, that's something different about that one. It's, an aspect of whatsoever's good and lovely. Think on these things. It changes what you're able to monitor and what you're sensitive to, what you're drawn to. You recognise it anywhere, and you recognise what's not. You start to get a feel in your occupation, your specialism, for what's likely to be valid and what is not likely to be valid. It's born of experience. But it's not born of experience of everything that's wrong. For that just gives you a conviction that there's no hope, it doesn't work. This is not the way to go. Whereas life is finding what the way to go is. So we dwell on what's good, what's harmonious, what works. I was watching a video of, I think they were called wood ants. And they don't war with neighbouring ant colonies. They're in harmony with them. They just don't have wars. They don't have just one queen. They have lots of queens in the same colony, hive. Or, no, not hive, what do you call it? Anthill. They live in peace. Both individually, in that they act as a unit, but communally between one community and another, in that they don't war with each other. And they're incredibly numerous. Forgotten which country they're in now, but it was a very cold climate, so I suspect it was, it was either northern North America, or it was, which means Canada, I suppose, or it was Northern Europe or Asia. Incidentally, they have very good technology too. They survive the freezing winters by living underground, and the pine needles fermenting, generating heat. Enough to get through the winter and not freeze. Then comes summer, which is, I don't know, not until something like April or May. They come out and get the sun for a while, and it was suggested that probably that the UV light kill any illnesses, bacteria, and that they may have accumulated during the winter, being underground. So they do have quite an advanced technology. And of course, if we were actually in harmony with each other, our standard of living would be much greater, and probably our technical achievements too. Cooperation between people seems to be extremely creative, although we have always lauded competition. But if you've studied market failure, as I have, you'd be very cautious about the benefits of competition. And there are some, don't get me wrong. But love and harmony is not one of them. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Oh, and it doesn't have to be something peculiar to high-powered ants either. I mean, what we might think of as a not too bright set of bunny rabbits live quite happily with each other. They're not constantly having bunny wars. It doesn't take a great genius of intellect to live in harmony with your fellow creatures. You would think that man would have grasped how to do the same, especially as he feels he's so advanced. And he is advanced technologically. But in terms of harmony and cooperation. He's an absolute infant. That's where our need lies. That's what should be our priority, not our technology. I was struck by the way in the US school buses are concerned with the problem of child safety. Are developed on the lines of technology coming to the rescue. You know, safer buses, safer structures, and so on. In other parts of the world, you know, like the UK or Australasia, we have a sociological solution. We use old buses, in fact, just buses, nothing special, safety for kids. But we rely on the society following rules and regulations. Drive slowly when you pass a school bus that's unloading or loading. You know, the most materialist state takes the technological solution. Better buses, safer buses. But the human approach is to rely on changing our behaviour. Don't drive too fast when you pass a school bus. Slow down. Have school zones, suddenly you're down to 30 kilometres per hour. Ladies to help at crossings. We are like the bodybuilder who's a wonderful appearance, but very little in terms of weightlifting ability. A technological show of achievement which is quite staggering. But our ability to relate to each other is appalling. What was the story in the Jesus story solution? This is my commandment, that you love one another. So I have loved you. It's all that. Including the relationship with God. That he's not some all-powerful king and master to be obeyed. He's a loving dad whose purpose is to love you. Give you life eternal, not condemnation. You see, there is a foundation from which your technology will be a blessing, and without that foundation, your technology is in danger of being a great curse that you just cannot cope with. Except by more and more technology, which brings more and more problems. Little children love one another. How? By knowing you are loved. And assured of life eternal by a God that is both able and loves you. And if you have that foundation, you can have hope and trust and faith, harmony and cooperation. You will achieve great things. Bless you. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.